from Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth Congregation. It's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parshat Shelach, New Times. If we look at our Parsha, one glaring question comes at us, and that is, how could the Jews do this? How could the Jews sin? How could they question God's ability to bring them into the land of Canaan? After all, they saw the miracles, they saw Sinai, they saw the splitting of the sea, the 10 plagues. How could they not believe that God had the power to bring them into the land of Israel? And what's all this business with the spies? The spies? Why do we need to scout out the land? We'll just go in and we'll conquer the land. We have to see if it's a good land. Of course it's a good land. God said it was going to be a good land. What's going on? Top it all off, Moshe says in Devarim, retelling the story in Deuteronomy, he says, Vayitav b'nei hadavar, that he thought this was a great idea. Why did he think it was a great idea? It seems pretty absurd to check up on God's land and see if it's worthy of conquer, and even to see how to conquer it seems unnecessary. So we have the idea of the Netziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who said that the truth is that if we were going to conquer this land, an Hagah, Nisit, in a miraculous way, this parsha makes no sense. The spies make no sense. Moshe's reaction to it makes no sense. The questions the spies were asked make no sense. But if we're now transitioning to a Hanhaga Tivit, we're now transitioning to something that is natural, then we say to ourselves, wait a minute, if now things are different, if now we're going to do things in a natural way, then maybe things are not the same. Maybe we need to know what type of land it is and how fortified the cities are, how strong the people might be. Maybe it's not so simple to conquer a land that is fortified, that has giants. Maybe it is a good idea, as Moshe said, to send the spies. This idea that now that they're going to Israel, people thought things were different, it comes up a lot in previous parshiot and in coming parshiot as well. Here we mentioned the story of the spies. In last week's parsha, Moshe says something very intemperate. He says, Vayita lanu le'inayim. He says, Yitro, Jethro, why don't you come with me? Come with us into the land of Israel. Vayita lanu le'inayim. You will be our eyes. Jethro is going to be the eyes? What about God? What about the cloud of glory? Does Moshe really need a Bedouin to show him around in the desert? Moshe has the guidance of God. And the answer is that he thought the times were changing. And in new times, there wouldn't be a cloud of glory. They would have things based on nature. And in nature, you need a scout. You need someone to help them out, to figure out the lay of the land. Then Moshe Rabbeinu says something extremely intemperate, so bad that the simple meaning of it makes Reb Shimon Bar Yochai say, Chas v'shalom, God forbid you should interpret it this simple way. But the fact is, as Rabbi Akiva says, the simple meaning of the text is that Moshe Rabbeinu challenged God as to whether he could provide meat for 600,000 people. Again, the question is, how could Moshe challenge God's ability? And the answer again is that Moshe assumed that we were now transitioning to a Hanhaga Tivit, to something natural. And if it'll be natural, there's no way to give meat naturally to 1 million people in the desert. Finally, in Parshat Balotcha, you also had Miriam. Miriam speaks against Moshe. Doesn't she know who she's talking about? And in next week's Parsha, we have Korach. Korach is challenging Moshe? Isn't that like challenging God himself, so to speak? After all, didn't they see that he was the one who spoke with God at Mount Sinai? He was the one who brought the plagues. He was the one who split the sea. How could they challenge his authority? And the answer is that Miriam thought that now that we've moved away from Mount Sinai, Moshe no longer plays his unique role. He doesn't have to be so different than other prophets now that we're leaving Egypt. Now we're leaving the notion of being in the desert through miracles. And Korach felt that Moshe's superior status, perhaps even Aaron's, was no longer applicable. Now that we've moved away from Mount Sinai, they moved away from Mount Sinai, and now things are different. What all these stories indicate is that although it is true, they are moving to a new stage of Jewish history. It is true, things will not be the same. It is true that things are not the same anymore. We're even on a different plane. But certain principles remain the same. Moshe remains Moshe. Trust in God remains trust in God. Certain things just don't change. This is the message of the Parsha. This is the message of these surrounding Parshiot. This is the great mistake the Jews made in their transition from the desert, supposedly, to the land of Israel. And this is a mistake we can't make, as we live in a world that's also new and has new challenges. We have to make sure that we understand that although times they are changing, but the basic principles, love of God, service to God, observance of mitzvot, learning Torah, these things remain the same, and they'll never change. This message of Parshat Shelach, and a message for today. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sephardi Beth Elameth congregation for our discussion of Parshat Shelach. Join us each week for our discussions of the Parsha, holidays.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.